From the dark into the light, from the small unto the great, from the valleys dark I ride, o'er the hills to conquer fate. Gentles, welcome to my newest variation of a guide to undeath, the cold chill of the never-ending cycle upon the material. Forgive a humble guide, as before thy hand strays too eagerly to the next page, I must set down 2 lines I have heard from the lips, if one may call them that, of a death knight, and I advise you to read them slowly. You have taken the light of my life from me, and now I will take the light from you. You will live in darkness until I tire of watching your pain. And then, with cold finality, once I fought to protect them, now I'll forget them, because mercy was the greatest lie I was ever told. Mark how neatly the promise of a better life has dripped away upon and towards the marrow of despair. Now stay thy course and track with me towards the page, and you will understand why death knights do not merely rise. They return with a purpose, and that purpose is almost never forgiveness. None can win the war with death, but losing the war does not mean the combatants have seen their last battle. Warriors who wish to fight beyond the limitations of flesh and blood can seek a forbidden way to steal their souls from fate. The cost of this immortality is death, but the fearless few who pay this price become death's allies. Indeed, death bestows power upon them. Their fleshless bones clad in skins of armor, their brittle fingers clasping weapons with a grip of iron, these knights of death take command of their souls and their destinies. When they charge from the shadowy afterlife into the lands of the living, death knights ride to wage war upon life itself. The origin of the death knight lies in a period so ancient that only legends can speak of it with authority. Each race has its own version of the story. For elves, the first death knight was a tragic figure who was tricked into becoming a death knight in order to win his love from the clutches of a rapacious rival. In this version, lies lead the story's hero to death. His rival is not a villain. His lady doesn't truly love him. The wicked fey creature who offers the hero a path to power leads him instead to damnation. After killing his apparent foe and learning the truth of his supposed love, the death knight embraces the flame of darkness in his heart by slaying the lady and turning his grief and rage upon the rest of the world. To dwarves, the first death knight was a greedy king who could not release his grip on the throne. The king sullied his clan, his kingdom, and the many honored dead who passed before him by seeking unnatural means of extending his life. Seeing foes and rivals everywhere, he arranged for his children, his relatives, and those who refused his commands to die in battle or exile. With no heirs and no kin, he claimed his throne for eternity by becoming a death knight and transforming his loyal retainers into undead servitors. Dwarven legend says the death knight still sits on his throne and rules over a kingdom of undead, entombed behind miles of rock by those few dwarves who escaped his reign alive. Humans relate several competing legends of the first death knight, but all bear a common theme. A man or woman wanted power and received it, and with that dark power, the newly made death knight accomplished its goals. The death knight might have been tricked or cursed, but in these tales, the means are unimportant when compared to the ends. Sometimes tragic, sometimes triumphant, these stories teach that great power allows the wielder to achieve great things, even if the price is cursed immortality. Halfling legend tells what might be the oldest story of the first death knight, and the story is so simple it might be closest to the truth. They say the first death knight arose in service to Orcus, demon prince of undead. The tale's protagonist, a human warrior of considerable skill and renown, was plagued with an unquenchable thirst for vengeance. When denied a position of power he felt was his right, he sought revenge but was denied satisfaction. Bloodied and disgraced, he fled to fell lands inhabited by demons. There he proved his worth to Orcus by defeating the demon prince's minions, and then by killing Orcus's enemies. When cultists of Orcus offered the man the power to avenge the slights against him, he readily accepted and became the first Death Knight. Those who desire the dark powers of a Death Knight in death must first perform the proper ritual. Discovering the right ritual to become a Death Knight can be extraordinarily hazardous. Good-intentioned individuals often destroy copies of it when they find them, and the most fanatical will kill those who seek its secrets, rather than allow knowledge of the ritual to spread. False rituals abound, traps laid for the unwise and unwary by those who seek souls for other dark purposes. Despite this, working versions of the ritual exist, each with its own peculiar requirements. One ritual might simply demand that the performer sacrifice a loved one, while another might stipulate that the caster must die in battle at the hands of a foe while in a graveyard or tomb. Frequently, the supplicant must have spilled the blood of innocence with the weapon that will become the soul weapon. The rarity of the true ritual drives many to seek it from a surer source, such as the cultists of Orcus. These vile madmen despise the gods and bow only to Orcus, who they believe will one day make eternal undead of them all. As worshippers of destruction, demons, and undeath, cultists of Orcus can never be trusted. But they enjoy seeing destructive undead unleashed upon the world, and few undead can be as dangerous as a Death Knight. The demands made of supplicants are a mystery, but the rites are terrible enough that even most Orcus cultists avoid this particular fate. Perhaps they do not feel worthy, or maybe, like many, they simply fear death. Fear of death is a luxury those seeking undead knighthood cannot afford. Instead, they must seek death out. They must hunger for it. They must embrace death to gain its power. Through death, they become death. The ritual to become a Death Knight tears the ritual caster's soul from his body and binds it to the weapon used in the ritual. The ritual caster dies as the living parts of the body are consumed in unholy green fire. From that conflagration rise the soulless bones of the living person, guided by an evil intelligence that no longer needs a brain for its vile thoughts, and an endless hatred that no longer requires a heart to drive its dark passion. A soul weapon is similar to a lich's phylactery, in that the Death Knight's soul resides there instead of in its body. But in most other ways, the soul weapon is the opposite of a phylactery. For a lich, its phylactery is a weakness that allows its permanent destruction, but the soul weapon is the Death Knight's greatest strength. A Death Knight literally wields its soul as a weapon. The soul weapon strikes burn with death, and at the Death Knight's command, it can become immaterial, passing through armor and shields to strike at its foe's unprotected flesh. A Death Knight need never fear its soul weapon's destruction. For with a thought, the knight can restore the weapon to wholeness and unwholesome power. If the weapon is taken, they become weakened and distracted, distraught by the loss of its soul and consumed by the need to recover it. However, no other creature can wield their soul weapon without feeling despair. So few can withhold a soul weapon from a Death Knight indefinitely. These undeath have no flesh and blood, and thus lack the needs of a living body. They are tireless warriors who only desire vengeance, conquest, and other bloody evils. Despite lacking muscle and heart, the fearsome monster maintains the strength and vigor they had in life. Like many of the living dead, Death Knights can be destroyed by damaging their bodies. Although they feel little pain, enough punishment can break their bones. Unlike a lich, a Death Knight cannot take refuge in a phylactery, and it does not reform from its soul weapon. When its earthly body is destroyed, a Death Knight's soul leaves its weapon and travels to whatever dire fate awaits it in the afterlife. No one can say with assurance what happens to the souls of Death Knights. Some Death Knights might believe they know the fate of their souls, and that knowledge spurs them to maintain their undead existence by any means. For the rest, the afterlife is an intangible and terrifying unknown. If no devil or vile deity seizes a Death Knight's soul, the knight can expect no quarter when its soul is weighed by the gods. Those who seek knighthood in death tend to be courageous and ambitious individuals. Either lords or leaders in life, in death they become both, leading lesser undead, but isolated from mortal society. A group of Death Knights might form a cadre of Dark Riders, but even among such a collusion of evil, one Death Knight typically assumes leadership over the rest. The most ancient among them might even have been the one to corrupt the rest, creating a society of undead. Although on rare occasions a person has been transformed into a Death Knight through accident, deception, or outside force, most Death Knights hunted for their undead fate. They might have been motivated by fear of the afterlife, but those who seek to deny gods or devils their souls cannot be considered cowards. Rather, the desire for knighthood in death stems largely from a desire for power. Those who become Death Knights are often already powerful warriors, so the temptation of undeath must offer them something mortality cannot: power unmitigated by age. Most who turn to death as a means of power are frustrated in life, thwarted in their efforts to achieve their ambitions. Defeat is less tolerable than death, and they are willing to trade flesh and life for the power to avenge themselves or to accomplish a goal. Upon achieving unholy knighthood, such individuals relentlessly pursue the cause of their rage. Continued failure results in greater frustration and anger, and drives the Death Knight to marshal superior forces. Since their goals lose little meaning to a Death Knight, it might return for revenge generations after those who wronged it are buried and gone. Success provides a Death Knight only fleeting happiness, for after achieving its goal, a Death Knight can only look forward to a cold eternity of endless struggle. Whatever their personalities in life, they become brooding and wrathful in death. They carry their souls in their bony hands, a constant reminder of a bargain that cannot be undone. For power to accomplish a single goal, Death Knights forego all other joys. That choice weighs upon its every immortal moment. Newly made Death Knights and those who regret their decision usually act alone, but with time, most of these undead accept their status among the undead and use it as a tool for power. They command lesser undead, and though they will work with dim-witted creatures such as zombies, most prefer minions that can accept and act upon complex commands. In particular, they prefer the services of undead that behave like warriors. Humanoid skeletons, battle wights, and sword wraiths serve them well as foot soldiers, captains, and bodyguards. Of course, Death Knights are rarely welcome among the living, and as they gather forces about themselves, they must stay on the move or find refuge lest an army be brought to bear upon them before they are ready for battle. A Death Knight might take command of a ruined castle, or it might raid and claim a fortress from its inhabitants. If the Death Knight thirsts for conquest, such conquered territory might become the heart of a dark empire. If they are focused on marshalling forces or nursing anger about a past defeat, the fortress might remain a haunted ruin, a source of dark rumors and whispered tales. Although the majority of their kind work alone or as wanderers, some become followers to greater forces. If they become undead unwillingly or at the behest of others, they may attach themselves to a superior who shows great purpose and initiative. Sometimes this is another Death Knight, but it might be a powerful undead, such as a lich or vampire, or even a mortal who holds influence over the undead. They might serve another for years or even centuries, but most eventually turn against their erstwhile masters, waiting until they are weak due to some loss. Their loyalty and sense of honor can last far longer than any living person's. But with its soul in hand, as eternity stretches out before it, a Death Knight finds few promises worth keeping, and morality a farce. If a Death Knight makes any long-term connection with a creature, it is most likely to be with a favored mount. Few horses can stand to carry such a horror, but evil beasts such as nightmares and undead mounts willingly carry one of their kind into battle. The teamwork necessary for rider and mount to act as one is often one of their only sources of lasting pleasure. This chapter, as now you are aware, gentles, is the next in my ongoing tour of the realm's most discourteous phenomena. Though I have trudged through crypts that smelled of decayed flesh and old vows, given with an element of hatred, alongside arguing about mortal existence with liches who believe themselves perhaps charming, I tell you plainly that few sights inspire such immediate tragedy as the first glimpse of a Death Knight, for they are the kind of undead that has always made me tear up, even just a tad. As champions of evil, Death Knights are armor-clad, skeletal warlords. They combine devastating martial prowess with blasphemous magic, and they wield both with the authority of commanders who have spent centuries deciding the fate of kingdoms or their battalions. Some lead unholy legions against towns and temples. Others remain in cursed citadels and ruined keeps, brooding for decades at a time, conserving their malice with the careful patience of those who no longer measure time in a 10-day, but in continual grudges. Every Death Knight is haunted by a legacy of tragedy and dishonor, and do not mistake that haunting for humility, for it is not the gentle ache of a lesson learned. It is the sharp, driving spur that pushes them toward ever greater evils, because a soul that cannot admit fault will always find new ways to punish others for its own disgrace. They are deadly combatants and domineering commanders, and while some speak of seeking an end to the curse that binds them to undeath, their selfish souls eternally shackle them to their fates, which is to say, they want release but not repentance, freedom but not consequence, and the gods are rarely so obliging when a villain asks politely. Indeed, it is gods of death who create Death Knights, martial champions of evil raised not as accidents, but as deliberate instruments. And most commonly, these horrors rise from the ranks of blackguards, fighters, rangers, and barbarians who live by violence and died with unfinished cruelties still warm in their hearts. Yet it must be said, for the warning is important, that a paladin who falls from grace near the moment of death may also become a Death Knight, and there is no tragedy more bitter than virtue collapsing so close to the end that even death itself refuses to take the body without leaving a mockery behind. Their physical form is that of their decayed body, a blackened skull with patches of rotting flesh clinging stubbornly to bone, 2 pinpoints of orange light smouldering in the eye sockets, and a voice that chills as it seems to echo from deep within, as though the words are being spoken from a hollow place that no longer exists. Death Knights were powerful in life, and they dress like it in undeath, favoring expensive garments and fine armor, often magical, because vanity outlasts lungs, and they are particularly fond of flowing capes to mark themselves as figures of importance, which I mention so you may identify them at a distance and begin retreating before your courage persuades you to stay. When the leader of a villainous order rises as a Death Knight, their wicked devotees sometimes follow them into that cursed existence as Death Knight aspirants. And this is how a single fallen commander becomes a lingering problem for entire regions. Not merely one tyrant, but a creed of tyrants in training, all eager to prove themselves worthy of a master who cannot die properly. Let us begin with Saint Kargoth, a noble human knight who, along with 13 fellow knights, became a Death Knight after being corrupted by Demogorgon. Yes, that Demogorgon, whose influence turns ambition into rot with alarming efficiency. Kargoth's downfall began with jealousy, a small poison administered daily when another knight was chosen to lead the Great Kingdom's Knight Protectors. Kargoth's fury and envy did not fade into silence as a wiser man's might have, but instead drove him to seek the power of undeath so he could pursue revenge without the inconvenience of mortality. In time, he became a hero to the worshippers of Hexter, hence his appellation as a saint, which is a splendid example of how language can be twisted until it squeals. And then there is Lord Soth, whose tale is so twisted that even the telling of it feels like handling barbed wire with bare hands. Soth was a great knight, and his transformation into a death knight began with a horror born at home. His wife gave birth to a monster, a representation of Soth's own soul made flesh. And instead of confronting the truth of himself, he chose the easiest cruelty and called it justice. Believing his wife had been unfaithful, he murdered her and the child, though Soth himself had been unfaithful. His hypocrisy has ever been the favorite shield of his personality through his time, according to plainer scribes. Within the world of Krynn, I tell you this as unfortunately it did not allow him to reflect upon another path to enlightenment. When his crime was discovered, knights loyal to him spirited him away from execution, and soon he and his followers found themselves besieged, trapped with their loyalty and their fear. Soth was told then that he could save the world from a great cataclysm, and he rode forth to undertake the quest. Yet he turned back when lies were whispered about his new wife's fidelity. Lies he embraced because they offered him an excuse to return to his own obsession. He confronted his new wife and their child as the cataclysm occurred, refusing to save them from a fiery death. The fire that killed them engulfed the whole keep, killing Soth and his allies. Yet the curse did not end with death, because it seldom does when pride is involved. Lord Soth rose as a death knight, and his followers joined him in undeath, proving that devotion, when aimed at the wrong man, can be as damning as any spell. So heed me, gentles. When you hear talk of a warlord who cannot die, of a keep that has grown quiet for a century, or of a black armored rider whose cloak trails like a banner from his back, dark as blackest night, do not comfort yourself with the thought that it's only a story I tell you. It is a history that has refused to finish, and it will gladly make you part of the next chapter if you offer yourself within sword's reach. From the dark into the light, from the small unto the great, from the valleys dark I ride o'er the hills to conquer fate. I am a death knight, and I do not forgive that slight.